On our daughter's graduation day, my ex-husband thanked his true love, then proposed to my sister on stage. He even admitted they started while we were married. So I took the mic and started reading from a folder titled, Affair Timeline with Receipts. I still remember the smell of champagne and carnations in the hotel ballroom. Our daughter Emily had just walked across the stage, her cap still crooked, her cheeks red from smiling too much. It was supposed to be her day, her graduation party. I'd spent weeks planning it. The slideshow, the string lights, the speeches. Everything was perfect until my ex-husband stood up with a microphone. "Before we toast," he said, clinking his glass, "I just want to thank my true love for standing by me through everything." Everyone thought he meant Emily. I did too. But then he smiled, wide and proud, and said, "Come up here, baby." And my sister, Rachel, stood up. There was this sound that rippled through the crowd, like air being sucked out of the room. People started whispering. My mother covered her mouth. Emily looked confused. I just sat there, frozen, watching as Rachel walked toward him in that pale blue dress she'd borrowed from me a month ago. He took her hand. "You've been my rock," he said, "even back when I was married to her." And then he pointed at me. Some people laughed awkwardly, others gasped. I just stared as he got down on one knee, on our daughter's graduation day. Rachel started crying, fake little sobs, mascara dripping. "Yes," she whispered into the mic, "1,000 times yes." The room exploded with noise, applause, cheers, camera flashes. My daughter ran out crying. My mom started yelling. And then, when I tried to stand up and speak, someone from his family actually booed. "Let it go, Karen," they said. "Don't be bitter." I felt the heat rise up my neck. Something inside me cracked open, years of betrayal, humiliation, and gaslighting all burning through my chest like acid. So I stood up, walked right up to the stage, heels clicking like gunfire. I didn't grab the mic. I took it. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight," I said, voice steady, calm, terrifyingly calm. "But since this seems to be the perfect time for honesty." From under the table, I pulled out a white folder I'd brought just in case. It was labeled in big black letters, "Evidence." Inside was everything, the emails, the photos, the timeline, the proof. I flipped it open, took a deep breath, and said, "Let's start from the beginning. You want to tell them about your true love? Let's tell them how it really started." And as the crowd went silent, Rachel's smile faltering, his smirk fading, I began to read. But before I tell you what was inside that folder, you need to understand how far this betrayal really went. Because it didn't start at Emily's graduation. It started years before, in the most ordinary way possible. Tom and I met when we were 22, both broke and trying to make something of ourselves in Atlanta. He was charming, ambitious, the kind of guy who could make a stranger feel like the most interesting person in the room. I was quieter, steadier. I worked in marketing, he was a mechanic back then. We built each other up. Or at least, I thought we did. We got married at 26. My sister Rachel was my maid of honor. She gave this emotional speech about two souls meant to be together. She was only 19 at the time, young, wild, and still trying to find her path. I never suspected a thing. When Emily was born, Rachel practically lived at our house. She said she wanted to help, and honestly, she did. She watched Emily while I worked. She'd drop by with groceries, cook for us, fold laundry. I thought she was my best friend. Looking back, it's sick how many moments I didn't see for what they were. The late-night phone calls between them. The inside jokes I didn't get. The way she'd wear my old sweatshirts when she stayed over. I used to think, wow, they get along so well. It's like he finally has the sister he never had. But things changed slowly. Tom started snapping at me for small things, saying I was too controlling, too cold, too focused on work. He started going on solo trips for business. And every time he did, Rachel would mysteriously go off-grid too. I found out about the first affair after 10 years of marriage. Not with Rachel, at least not that I knew. It was someone from his gym. I confronted him. He cried, promised to change, and I took him back because Emily was only 7. He swore he'd do therapy, said he was broken, that he needed me. Rachel was the one who comforted me through that. She said, "He's an idiot, but at least he loves you enough to fight for it." God, I hate remembering that. Then, 3 years later, I got sick. Nothing fatal, just a rough patch where I was exhausted all the time, diagnosed with thyroid issues. I was gaining weight, my hair was thinning, and I didn't feel like myself. That's when Rachel started visiting even more. She'd do things like make Tom coffee, just the way he likes it, or bring him lunch to work. I'd thank her for helping. She'd smile, all sweet and innocent. One night I overheard her laughing on the phone and saying, "She still doesn't know." I brushed it off, assuming she was gossiping about someone else. By year 14, Tom had fully checked out. No more date nights, no more affection. I blamed myself. He started sleeping in the guest room because of his back. I told people we were fine. Then, right before our 15th anniversary, Rachel announced she was moving across town for a new job. Tom helped her move. He was gone for the entire weekend. And something in me, something deep and sharp, finally woke up. I started digging. What I found was worse than I could have imagined. And when I say worse, I mean years of lies that made me question every memory I had of my marriage, my family, and even my own sanity. It was the kind of betrayal that doesn't just break you, it rewrites your whole life story. It started with a phone bill. Tom and I still shared a family plan because it was cheaper, and one night, while looking through the statements, I saw hundreds of calls and texts to a number I didn't recognize. When I looked it up, it was Rachel's. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe they were just close. But the timestamps, the timestamps told a different story. They talked every night after midnight, sometimes for hours. Then I checked his email. He'd forgotten to log out of his account on our laptop. There were dozens of messages, all archived under a folder called Taxes. Inside were photos of Rachel, her in a hotel room mirror, her in my kitchen, her lying on our bed. The first picture was dated from years ago, during the time I was still pregnant with Emily. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I was going to throw up. I just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at those images until the sun came up. When he came downstairs, all casual, asking if I'd made coffee, I couldn't even look at him. I asked, "How long?" He froze. Then he said, "What?" And I could tell by the look on his face that he knew exactly what I meant. "Don't do this now," he said. "You'll wake Emily." Like I was the problem. He didn't apologize, he didn't deny it either. Just said, "You always pushed me away." Rachel understood me. I slapped him, hard. Then I told him to get out. He packed a bag and left that night. 2 weeks later, he filed for divorce, said it was irreconcilable differences. Rachel didn't speak to me. Neither did half our family, because somehow he managed to spin it like I'd been the bitter, controlling one. He moved in with her before the ink on the divorce papers was even dry. The months that followed were hell. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time I saw Rachel's name, I wanted to scream, but I stayed quiet for Emily's sake. She was angry at both of us, confused, trying to navigate it all. Tom paraded Rachel around town like a prize. They'd show up at the same restaurants I used to go to. They even posted family photos with Emily online like they were already married. Everywhere I went, people whispered. "Poor thing," they'd say. Or worse, I heard she knew all along. But I didn't fight it. I just watched, waited, gathered every piece of evidence I could, because somewhere deep inside me I knew this story wasn't finished yet. Then about a year later, Rachel reached out. She said she wanted to make peace. She came over, crying, apologizing, saying, "I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I just fell in love." And she hugged me like she hadn't torn my entire life apart. That night, after she left, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop again. Because if she was finally ready to talk, I wanted to make sure she told the whole truth. And that's when I found something I wasn't supposed to see. Something that changed everything I thought I knew about their relationship, and about what really happened during those business trips years ago. In one of Tom's old backup folders, something synced from his phone years ago, I found a string of emails between him and Rachel that went way beyond an affair. They were talking about money, specifically about a joint savings account I didn't know existed. At first, I thought maybe it was just him hiding income, trying to dodge taxes or something. But then I saw the account holder names: Rachel M. and Thomas R. Wilson. My maiden name was Morgan. Rachel's was Morgan. They'd opened the account 6 months before our wedding. The earliest transaction, a $5,000 wire from my dad. The note said, "Wedding contribution." That was money my parents had given us to help start our life together. Except instead of putting it toward a down payment, Tom and Rachel had quietly pocketed it. Over the years, they'd added to it: deposits, withdrawals, even investment transfers. The balance was over $180,000. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely breathe. Every vacation we couldn't afford, every time Tom told me money's tight, every side job Rachel picked up to help out, they were funneling it into that hidden account. Together. And the worst part, there were receipts from my own company. Rachel had been doing freelance design work for the marketing firm I managed. I'd helped her get that job. She'd overbilled the client under my project codes, and Tom had deposited her extra pay straight into their account. That's when I realized it wasn't just about love. It was theft. A years-long con pulled by two people who'd been under my roof, eating my food, hugging my daughter, pretending to be family. I felt sick. I printed everything. Every message, every transfer, every lie. Then I started digging through old photos and found something that nearly broke me. A picture of Tom and Rachel at the cabin in Blue Ridge, Georgia. The same one he'd told me he went to alone to clear his head after our first big fight. The photo was dated 2 days before our 10th anniversary. He wasn't clearing his head. He was celebrating with her. After that, I went quiet. I didn't confront them, not yet. I knew that blowing up right away would only make me look unstable. And honestly, I wanted to wait for the perfect moment, one where I could destroy the facade they'd built piece by piece. Then one night, Emily came home from her dad's place crying. She said, "Aunt Rachel told me not to call you Mom around her." That was the final crack in me. I realized this wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was erasure. They weren't satisfied with taking my marriage. They wanted to rewrite history so that I was the outsider and they were the rightful family. So I started my own plan. Quietly, carefully. And by the time Emily's graduation came around, I had everything I needed. But there was still one piece of the puzzle I hadn't figured out yet, one that would make my revenge much darker and more personal than I ever expected. Because when I traced one last bank transfer, it didn't go to Tom or Rachel. It went to someone else, someone neither of them knew I had found. After I printed everything, bank records, emails, the hotel selfie with their legs tangled on my bed, I did the thing everyone tells you not to do. I sat with it, not to fall apart but to plan. Grief is messy, revenge needs a spreadsheet. I opened one and labeled columns: evidence, witnesses, timeline, public risk, legal risk, trigger event. I wasn't naive. Whatever I did had to survive lawyers, PR, and the kind of gossip that turns victims into villains overnight. I also had a kid to protect. Emily was the accident in the middle of all this. She loved her father and loved Rachel in her simple child way. I refused to weaponize her, but I also refused to let them continue rewriting our life like I was a footnote. First, secure the evidence. I duplicated everything and uploaded copies to a private, encrypted cloud I set up under an alias. I printed tabs and color-coded them, dates in red, money in blue, photos in green. Physical copies went into a firebox I kept at a friend's house in Decatur. I told her it was for estate stuff. She asked no questions. Bless her. Second, legal. I consulted an attorney who specialized in family fraud, someone a friend recommended who once handled a big embezzlement case in Buckhead. He read my packet, tapped his pen, and said the word I needed to hear. Recoverable. He also said the other words I feared. Expensive and lengthy. He advised I move quietly, open a civil case for conversion and constructive trust, and preserve privileged communications. I nodded, listened, paid him a retainer, and told him to file a preservation letter to the bank holding the joint account. He smiled like he could smell victory. I smiled like I was starting to feel air again. Third, social calibration. I couldn't just show up with a folder and scream. They'd spin it. So I built deniability into everything. I continued to go to PTA meetings, to my book club, to Emily's soccer games. I was pleasant. I smiled, I made small talk. People assumed I'd lost weight from grief. No one suspected I was weaponizing receipts. That was important. Appearance buys you time. Fourth, psychological. I needed to understand the enemy. Tom's arrogance was his blind spot. He loved spectacle. Rachel craved approval. Both underestimated me because they believed the story they told themselves. She's passive, she'll tolerate. So I planned to weaponize their arrogance. If he wanted performance, I would give him a stage, one where the truth would be louder than his theatrics. Fifth, allies. I reached out to one person I hadn't told the full story to, my brother, Michael, who lived in Marietta. He hated Tom. I knew he would help without spectacle. He agreed to be a witness for the timeline of who moved when. Another ally was a bartender at the restaurant they frequented, who remembered seeing Tom and Rachel argue about moving funds, once, drunk and sloppy. Small confirmations like that make big lies collapse. And finally, the trigger. I wanted a moment when the facade was tight, when their victory lap would be most visible, because public humiliation for them equaled public vindication for me. That's why I chose Emily's graduation party. It was perfect, full of people, sentimental speeches, cameras, and a daughter whose day should have been hers but whose presence guaranteed the maximum audience. I rehearsed my walk, the way I would take the mic, the exact words I'd say before opening the folder. I tested my voice in the driveway the way actors rehearse monologues. I practiced detachment. I knew that the louder they cheered for each other, the worse the fall would be. There was one last thing I hadn't told anyone, the last bank transfer that led to a name I didn't recognize. I kept that card face down on the table of my plan. It was the blank in the map that promised an even darker route. If I was honest, that unknown made the plan dangerous, and if it paid off, devastatingly final. I folded my spreadsheet closed, breathed, and reminded myself, I wasn't doing this for revenge alone. I was doing it to keep my daughter's history clean, to make sure the story that survived was true. A week before the graduation, I decided to trace that final bank transfer. It wasn't a big one, just $3,000, but the name caught my eye, J. Merritt. I didn't know anyone by that name. When I called the bank posing as Tom's assistant, old habits from my marketing work helped. They said the transfer was a monthly recurring payment. To who? Private tutoring, the rep said. For a minor. My stomach dropped. Emily had mentioned a tutor once, someone who helped her catch up on math after staying with her dad. I assumed it was through her school. I called her and asked, "Hey honey, what's your tutor's name again?" She said, "Oh, Miss Jess." Dad and Aunt Rachel found her online. My hands went cold. "Does she come to your dad's place?" "Yeah," she said. "But sometimes she meets us at this hotel near his work if Aunt Rachel's working late." "She's really nice, Mom." Hotel. My throat closed. I looked back at the transactions and realized the tutoring payments started exactly when Emily turned 13. That was 2 years ago. The same year Tom and Rachel moved in together. I couldn't breathe. Every worst-case scenario exploded in my head. I called my lawyer. He told me not to jump to conclusions, but to investigate quietly. He knew someone who could run a background check. The report came in 3 days later. Jess Merritt wasn't a tutor. She wasn't even employed. Her real name was Jessica Miller, and she had a sealed record in another state for fraud and identity theft. She'd also once been a client at the same rehab clinic where Tom volunteered years earlier when he told me he was mentoring addicts. Tom wasn't paying her to tutor. He was paying her hush money. The messages attached to the bank account confirmed it. 2 of them, "Don't reach out again, you promised to keep quiet." "I have your flights, you were both careless. This is your problem, not mine." Flights. I searched his old cloud storage again, combing through old itineraries, receipts, anything. And there it was, a scanned booking confirmation from 6 years ago. 2 tickets to Orlando, dated during one of Tom's solo business trips. Passenger names, Thomas R. Wilson and Jessica Miller. She'd been a fling. Another affair before Rachel. He'd gotten her pregnant, something his family never knew. The payments to Jess were for the child support he was secretly paying under the guise of tutoring. But here's where the floor fell out. There were also deposits from Rachel's personal account going to Jess too. Same amount, same timing. I remember whispering aloud, "Oh my God," because that meant Rachel knew about the child. Not only knew, she was helping him pay to keep it hidden. And judging by the language in the messages, Jess had something else. Photos, maybe proof that could ruin their entire happy couple act. That's when I realized. I wasn't the only one with a folder. Jess had her own. So I found her. Quietly. I drove to a rundown apartment complex outside Marietta, the address from the report. She answered the door with tired eyes and an instinctive flinch, like she expected trouble. When I told her who I was, she froze. Then she whispered, "You're her," I nodded. "I'm not here to fight you," I said. "I just want the truth." She invited me in. And what she told me next made everything, The money, the secrecy, the proposal make sense in a way that made my skin crawl. Because the child he'd been paying for wasn't just his secret, it was Rachel's insurance. Jess sat across from me at her chipped kitchen table, a baby photo clutched in her hand. The kid looked around 8, dark hair, the same eyes as Tom. I could barely breathe when she said, "He told me he was separated when we met. Said his wife was cold and crazy. You know the story, I guess." Yeah, I knew that story too well. She told me everything in a low, shaking voice. She'd met Tom when he was mentoring at a rehab center after one of his DUIs. She was barely holding her life together. He offered her help, a place to stay, even money. He said he could fix everything, she said. Then I got pregnant. When she told him, he panicked, but promised to handle it. 2 weeks later, Rachel showed up at Jess's apartment. Not Tom, Rachel, Jess said. She was so calm. She said she was his sister-in-law, but it felt like she was in charge. She told me if I cared about my baby, I'd keep quiet, that they'd take care of it privately. Rachel wrote her a check for $10,000 and made her sign a non-disclosure agreement. Jess was young, scared, broke. She signed. After the baby was born, they set up the monthly tutoring payments to make it look legitimate. Jess said Rachel handled it all. She told me I was protecting your family's reputation. I asked, "Did Tom ever see the child?" She hesitated. "Once, when she was 2. Rachel brought him. She said they wanted to make sure she looked like him. Then she made him leave before anyone saw." I sat there, gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. It hit me like a freight train. Rachel wasn't some victim pulled into an affair. She was the architect. She'd been covering Tom's messes for years, running money, hiding lies, cleaning up everything so he could keep looking like the charming husband. But she hadn't done it out of love. She did it because she wanted what I had. She'd been obsessed with Tom long before I ever knew it. Jess told me Rachel once said, "He should have married me first." She called herself the real wife. When I finally stood to leave, Jess grabbed my hand. "They're dangerous when cornered," she said. "Be careful." Driving home, I felt this eerie clarity settle in. All those years of confusion, why Rachel defended him, why she never dated anyone seriously, why she always found excuses to stay close, suddenly made sense. She didn't just want Tom, she wanted my life. The house, the family, the respect, even my daughter's love. And when she finally got him, she still wasn't satisfied. That's why she pushed for the big public engagement. It wasn't romance, it was erasure. She wanted everyone to watch her take what she thought was rightfully hers. Tom, he was just a puppet. She knew how to manipulate him, flatter his ego, control his narrative. She kept his secrets because they gave her leverage. And when she waved that ring on stage at Emily's graduation, she wasn't just celebrating a win, she was finishing a story she'd been writing for 15 years. But she made one fatal mistake. She forgot that I don't quit quietly anymore. When I got home, I opened my folder, added Jess's sworn statement, the payment logs, the NDA copy she still had, and labeled it all under a new tab. Motive: by the time graduation night came, I wasn't just exposing an affair. I was exposing a conspiracy built on money, manipulation, and lies that had stolen over a decade of my life. They thought they'd buried me in humiliation, but I'd brought a shovel. So there I was, standing under those glittering ballroom lights, in front of everyone who ever pitied me, laughed at me, or whispered behind my back. Tom had just proposed. Rachel was still crying into the mic, pretending this was some fairytale ending. And I was holding my white folder labeled evidence. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just opened it and said, "Before you all raise your glasses to celebrate my ex-husband's true love, I think everyone should know what kind of love story this really is." The first page was a printed email, Rachel's message to Tom, dated from my wedding week, telling him she'd opened the joint account with the money from my dad's wedding gift. I held it up, reading it aloud. "It's all set up, babe. Don't worry, she'll never check." The room fell silent. Then I flipped to the next page. Bank transfers, thousands of dollars moving from our joint account to R. Morgan. My voice didn't shake once. People started murmuring. Tom's mother gasped. Rachel's face drained of color. Then I said, "And if that isn't enough, here's the part where they paid hush money every month to a woman named Jessica Miller to cover up the child my husband had 6 years before he left me." A ripple of noise rolled through the room, shocked gasps, phones snapping photos, someone whispering, "Oh my God." Tom lunged forward, grabbing for the mic. "You're sick," he hissed. "You're destroying our daughter's day." I looked at him, calm, almost cold, and said, "You did that the second you decided her aunt was worth more than her mother." Then I slid one last page from the folder. A notarized affidavit from Jess, naming both of them in the hush money arrangement. The room went dead silent. Rachel tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Tom turned bright red, eyes darting toward the exit. "You should have picked a smaller crowd," I said. Then I turned to the audience. "I apologize to anyone who came here to celebrate Emily. She deserves better parents than this. But she also deserves the truth." And I walked off the stage. The aftermath hit fast. Tom's proposal video, recorded by some cousin, went viral online before the night was even over. Only it didn't go viral as a love story. The caption said, "Guy proposes to sister-in-law at daughter's graduation, then gets exposed by ex-wife mid-toast." Within days, he was fired from his company. Rachel's employer launched an audit after hearing about the hush money and fraud allegations. My lawyer filed a civil suit for misappropriated marital assets and restitution. Because of the documentation and Jess's statement, the judge froze both their accounts pending investigation. They lost everything: house, car, reputation. Emily lives with me full-time now. She doesn't talk about her dad much. I don't badmouth him, I don't need to, she saw it all. She knows. Rachel tried calling once, a few weeks after the story blew up online. I let it ring. Then I texted back one line, "You wanted my life. Now you have my name attached to your ruin." I blocked her after that. It's been 6 months since the graduation. The lawsuits are still dragging on, but I don't care. My peace isn't about money anymore. It's about silence, the kind that used to feel empty but now feels like control. Sometimes I still look at that white folder in my closet. I never destroyed it. It's my proof, my anchor, my reminder. And when people ask how I stayed so calm that night, I tell them the truth. I wasn't angry. I was done. And done is the most dangerous kind of quiet there is.